So thank you again, Melissa, for joining us from Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'm so excited, Kate, that you reached out, and it's really great to connect with other organizations that have similar missions. I really believe that we're stronger together, and I'm just really excited to be here to share a little bit about what happened in Hawaii. Maybe there's tidbits of it that can, help the work that you're doing in Michigan. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to try sharing my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared just to kind of have some visuals as I, talk through the story about how Hawaii came to pass its 100% renewable portfolio standard. So I've started the presentation. Kate, is it showing up for you folks? Okay, great.
Yes, it is. It's great.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so as Kate shared, I'm Melissa. I work for an organization called Blue Planet Foundation. We're a pretty small nonprofit. There's 9 of us on staff, but we, like you, have a big mission, big goal, and big vision. But I just want to talk a little bit about what makes Hawaii special and why we think that Hawaii can really has been a leader, and hopefully, there are lessons learned that we can take from the work that we're doing here, and it can be applied to other places. So Hawaii is more than just sand and sun, although we don't have too much sun today. It's a little bit cloudy. But we're a small and mighty state, and I'm sure you've heard folks refer to Hawaii as a postcard from the future. And, we see ourselves as kind of a laboratory or test bed to kind of test the latest and greatest of all things. And we're also, we're islands of innovation. So we have a history of innovating. Iolani Palace in Honolulu was actually the first royal residence to be lit by electricity. And that was in 1886. And they had electricity even before the White House. You probably also know that Hawaii is home to climate science and has famously been monitoring the Earth's atmospheric carbon dioxide since the 1950s atop Mauna Loa on the Big Island. And as I mentioned, Hawaii is also home to Blue Planet Foundation, and I've had the privilege of working with Blue Planet for about 3.5 years now. And it's been a really incredible journey, and it's been a place where I've been able to learn that even the small guys can, change the course of history. And we set out at Blue Planet Foundation to end the use of fossil fuels starting in Hawaii. Our founder, Hank, is a guy named Hank Rogers, and he picked Hawaii as Blue Planet's home because he sees it as a unique and a special place, as we do at the foundation. And that it can really be an epicenter for innovation and climate action. Blue Planet is more than just our name. It really embodies our view of the world and our role in the cosmos. So if you zoom out, looking into space and look back at the Earth, in Hawaii at the center, you'll see a blue planet. So that really shapes the way that we, think about the work that we do. We're this tiny island chain in the middle of ocean, in the middle of this blue planet. So it's not surprising that from Hawaii came the first 100% renewable energy goal in the country. And we're still the only state to date, but I'm really hopeful that there'll be more coming soon. Thanks to your efforts in Michigan, and there's some cool work that I'm going to be talking about in a minute, a partnership that we have that we're hoping to get even more states on board. So in 2015, Hawaii updated its renewable portfolio standard. So now it requires 100% clean energy, or our electricity sector, to come from renewable sources by 2045. And I just wanted to, again, through this conversation, share a little bit about how we got there. So our starting place was the state that was most addicted to oil. So we average about a 1 super tanker per week habit, and that's about 45 million barrels annually. So we were really on a path to nowhere when we started this effort. And our RPS at the time expired in 2030, but as advocates, we knew that we had to do something about our fossil fuel addiction, and so that we knew that we needed to do better. And when I think about Hawaii's clean, or when Blue Planet Foundation talks about Hawaii's journey to getting this 100% clean energy goal, we like to think of it as a story about magical thinking. So 2015 wasn't the first year that we advocated for the 100% goal. When we first introduced the bill, that was in 2013, the governor at the time called us magical thinkers and likened us to Harry Potter. So the bills that we introduced in 2013 and 2014 fell flat, and the early opponents called 100% renewable energy impossible. You may hear similar arguments and such in the work that you do. But as nonprofit advocates, we were far too committed to give up on our mission. So we came back and we adapted, and we rethought our strategy and our approach going into the 2015 legislative session. And there are kind of 4 important lessons that we learned out of that experience that I wanted to share with all of you folks. And I think these are things that really made the difference for us in our adapted approach, and I think can be instructive to other places that are hoping to go down a similar path. So first, I have a snag. There we go. First, we learned not to underestimate the importance of leadership. So we knew going into the 2015 session that we were operating in a slightly different environment this time around. We actually had a new governor in the state. We had a new CEO of the utility, and we had a new chair of our Public Utilities Commission. So these were just some new faces, some new voices, and open to new ways of looking at this and really wanting to make their mark. And then second, we learned the value of finding the right messengers. Blue Planet's voice as advocates in the clean energy space was, an expected voice in the debate, but we worked really hard to build unconventional coalitions of support. So we did things like take out an op-ed, and we had support of, former governor, real estate developers, the dean of the College of Engineering, and we even worked with labor unions, and they also did an op-ed supporting 100% clean energy. We worked with students because they are the very ones that are going to inherit the consequences of our choices today, and they're the ones that are going to be the leaders in 2045 when we're 100% powered by clean energy. So kids drew pictures of what they wanted the world to see, and then we delivered those pictures to legislators. We separated them by district so that the legislators could, actually hear from the students in their districts. And we thought this was important because we really wanted the messages to come directly from those that would be most impacted. Third, we learned the value of focusing on people. And, the work that we do, the work that you do, it's ultimately about people. And I remember during the 2015 session, working into the night, and personally emailing and thanking each and every one of the, over 150 people that submitted testimony at each of the hearings throughout our legislative session. And I really wanted them to feel like they were part of something big. And I still believe that it's, connections like that that really inspired the authentic and compelling testimony that tipped the scales in helping this thing get to the finish line. Hawaii's rooftop solar revolution also was enabler for our 100% push, and the foundation of our people-focused campaign in 2015. So the rapid adoption of rooftop solar leading up to 2015, residents were able to see solar panels on their neighbors' homes, and it really pulled the idea of widespread renewable energy out of abstraction. So it created a sense that clean energy is no longer a someday thing, that it works and it's powering local families' homes right now. And another way that we took renewable energy out of abstraction and made the invisible visible was through our Island Pulse kiosks. So these are kiosks that can display real-time energy data for the island of Oahu. So the public can log on to islandpulse.org at any time and see right now how much energy we're using on the island and how much of it comes from fossil fuels like oil and coal and how much of it is coming from clean energy like wind and solar. And we place these kiosks at the state capitol so that legislators and the public could visualize what the transition to 100% clean energy looks like. So again, yeah, you can check. If you're ever curious about how much clean energy Hawaii, the island of Oahu, is using at any given time, you can go to islandpulse.org. And that was actually a partnership with our local utility who provides that data for us. And then finally, but perhaps most important, but we think they're all important, we came to appreciate the value of compromise. So people often ask how we settled on the 2045 date, and that it surely must be the result of some extensive modeling effort that took a lot of time and cost a lot of money. But actually, when Blue Planet introduced the bill, our target was 2040. So you might have remembered a few slides ago looking at the pictures that the kids drew, they had all said 100% by 2040. So that was our original goal going into the 2015 session. So the House of Representatives in the state had agreed to that goal, but the Senate preferred a 2050 goal. So in a moment of brilliant legislative wisdom, they just split the difference and set the date at 2045. So that's how we got our 2045 date for 100% RPS. So in 2015, Governor David Ige signed the 100% bill into law. And then, we celebrated and really took the time to let that moment soak in. And, we celebrated with the key stakeholders that really rallied together and helped us get the bill over the finish line. So in this photo, I know you probably don't know these folks, but it's, we have members of our Public Utilities Commission, representatives from labor unions, advocates, nonprofits, legislators, community members. So it was really, a gathering, everybody coming together. And I look back and I think about that moment quite often. And I wonder, thinking about, talking to other states that want to do something similar, I wonder, did we just get lucky and were we just dealt the right hand? And I think perhaps that's true. But I also think that, the classic saying comes into play, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And if we hadn't risked being called magical thinkers in 2013 and 2014, I don't believe that we would have the 100% target that we have today. And I think what's even more remarkable than the goal is what happened after. And we saw a complete transformation in the narrative around our energy future. So opponents went from thinking that 100% renewable was impossible, to in the second year, I think being skeptical about it, and then after the law passed, completely changing their vision statement. So this is a screenshot from our the main utility in the state, Hawaiian Electric. They've really embraced this 100%, and they have TV ads on commercial or TV ads advocating and showing what they're doing toward getting to 100% clean energy. So they've really embraced that, and I don't, we wouldn't have seen that kind of transformation if the goal hadn't been set. So I just want to kind of close out my discussion by talking about a new project that we have, kind of taking Hawaii's 100% story and attempting to share it with other places. That prompted us, and this kind of story about magical thinking prompted us to launch what we call Project Repower, and it's a partnership with the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. And we've also been collaborating with Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, on this effort. So leveraging Hawaii's experience, Repower it's an initiative aimed at accelerating renewable energy standards at the state level, so specifically at the state level, by convening a network of state legislators from a range of geographic regions and political affiliations. So, we realize and really appreciate that to tackle the enormous issue of climate change, Hawaii isn't enough, and we want to help catalyze adoption elsewhere. So it's in its initial stage, Project Repower involved a three-part strategy designed to develop an action plan, educate a broad base of legislators, and provide close collaboration and resources for a smaller set of really committed legislative champions. So in April, we gathered a core team and worked with experts at RMI to develop a strategy specifically for engaging legislators. So really the focus of this campaign is state legislators. So it's really tailored to that audience. And then the core team that we assembled was 2 former legislators, a sitting legislator from Connecticut, an analyst from NREL, and then we also had representatives from RMI, Blue Planet, and NCEL, the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. And what we came up with, working with RMI, was a 3-part toolkit for legislators. So in August, we unveiled, so this is the core team, in August at NCEL's National Issues Forum, we unveiled this toolkit to 120 legislators. So you'll see here on the screen that it's kind of broken up into 3 tiers based on engagement. So the first tier is really about providing just educational resources to a broad group of legislators. Tier 2 provides a little bit more kind of interaction or mentorship with legislators that have demonstrated that they really want to move forward with this. And then Tier 3, which we haven't quite embarked on just yet, and we're in the process of trying to scale up to do that, is really being a support for legislators as they're working through passing this type of legislation. So specifically related to the Tier 2 legislators, as a follow-on activity to the forum that we participated in August, we invited a select group of 8 legislators to a strategy workshop in Hawaii, and we hosted them, and we walked through kind of a 2-day intensive workshop focused on 100% clean energy. And it was pretty amazing. To be honest, in the forum in August it was my first time kind of being in a group with 120 legislators all wanting to talk at the same time, and it was really kind of a learning curve for us on how they communicate and how to really get their attention. But it was night and day. The workshop in December, they were so engaged, and even in post-workshop time, over dinner, over drinks, they were all couldn't stop talking about 100% renewable energy. So it was pretty awesome to see them so engaged in this topic, especially because we hear just so much controversy around it as advocates. So the workshop was hosted at a off-the-grid ranch on the Big Island. So they got to kind of see 100% renewable energy in action. And then they worked through, identifying specific needs and barriers. So they got mentorship opportunities. We had energy experts and other, just kind of talking through and working through these issues with their peer legislators, we thought was really valuable. So some of the topics that we discussed over the 2-day workshop are identifying some common needs across states. So this slide is just, these are snippets from the summary that I put together after that workshop. They had also done some stakeholder influence mapping. So they had created this metric. The group ranked the relevant stakeholders in their states according to their influence. And then we had a really in-depth discussion about opposition arguments and supporting arguments for addressing and responding to each of those stakeholders. And then on day 2, it got really exciting, and we moved into kind of creating this high-level roadmap to passing 100% renewable energy targets. So identifying resources and actions needed pre and post-introduction. So we're in the process of kind of figuring out what's next for that project. We got a lot of interest. We had, at the workshop, we had representatives from Minnesota, Washington, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So it was a great spread. And then we had some of our legislators from Hawaii also there to share kind of they have, I think, sometimes more to offer because they are our peers, and legislators really, we found that they really respond to their peers. They appreciate the guidance and the resources, but they also, it goes a long way, again, going back to finding the right messengers. So having their peers communicate some of this stuff is really valuable. So we're in 2018 now and hoping to develop the program a little bit more so that we can provide more targeted resources to legislators in specific states. So just to close, Hawaii's 100% renewable energy law is already showing the power of bold clean energy targets and how they can save billions of dollars, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase economic and energy security, foster strong public and private collaborations, and then help utilities thrive and create new approaches to value creation. And those are all things that have seen or starting to see in Hawaii. Project Repower and our efforts going forward are developed to help states do the same with an iterative and tailored process that matches the needs and political realities of what's happening in state. Because we know, Kate, you mentioned at the beginning, Michigan's different. Every state's different. Every state has unique challenges, a different political landscape. So this isn't really about kind of creating a one size fits all, but really all helping each other and things that are focused on what's right for our local communities and the beneficiaries that we work with as a nonprofit. So as you move forward in your work, and I did have a chance to just take a look at your website and was impressed with the work that you're doing. I hope that you'll continue to not forget about the power of thinking big. And, we're all working on solving problems that have never been solved before. And we advocate that, you balance all of these discussions and these complicated technical issues and just all the complexities that come with this work, that you balance those things with just a dose of magical thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is really inspiring to hear about the work that you've done and what you've been able to accomplish in Hawaii, and the ongoing work to catalyze this in other states. That's really exciting to hear. I want to open it up for questions for folks. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Oh, we have one here. Phil, do you have a question?
I do. Thanks, Melissa. It was great. So early on in the process, you set up demonstration projects. Could you talk a little bit more about that, about showing people how renewable energy works? How important was that? How critical was that to get people to change? And I guess the other question is, how big do they need to be, and who do you need to show?
So I think for Blue Planet's work, maybe I'll stop my screen share so that folks can see me. For Blue Planet Foundation's work, a lot of our work was more on the public campaign and advocacy side. So rather than specific demonstration projects. So I had shown the slide of the local family with rooftop solar. So because of it was a variety of factors, but our NEM program was hugely successful and really sparked a dramatic increase in rooftop solar. So that kind of happening at the same time, there were a lot of different factors happening at the same time that kind of created the perfect sauce for legislators to see that this is something that's popular in the community. This is something that people are familiar with. That I think really got them into thinking that this was something that was possible. So it was a lot of, I think what we saw as really effective as advocates was investing that time in community outreach, even before the bill was passed. So we didn't just, and it was really a year-long effort. So of course we put more resources and time into, marketing efforts and, op-eds and talking to the media during the legislative session. But we we really built it as a year-long campaign. And I think, you know, the importance of having specific examples, it can't be understated. So legislators like to have specific examples and data. So to the extent that you can, you know, highlight those things for them, I think that's really valuable. And even if it's just spotlights, that, you know, their attention span is pretty short. So if you can just highlight some, you know, big wins, I think that's sufficient. That you don't necessarily have to show that, oh, this, you know, this is completely tried and true. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, because I think what we hear a lot in the field here is, well, we want to do this, but we don't have any examples to show. And you know, I'm just wondering if it's super important that the examples are local or if they can be from somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so one thing that we have done, you know, we're the first state to set 100% renewable energy goal. So we definitely had that challenge of trying to show that this is possible without having, you know, someone else to kind of hitch onto. So we did rely on specific examples from other places, particularly, you know, island nations. So other countries, even though there's not a state example, but there are other, you know, countries and island nations and places around the world that have gone 100% renewable. So we did highlight those examples and then mixed that in with some local examples of, you know, renewable energy in the community and why it's popular and possible. So I think it's a mix of those combinations. You can kind of supplement the local examples with some more concrete examples from other places.
Got it. All right. Thanks.
I have a related question, I think. I'm wondering if you were able to, or if there was some modeling or some planning for where the renewable energy would come from and what that would look like. Maybe not all the way to 100%, but if your team or someone had put together a plan for how you could start moving there rapidly.
So also ongoing during this whole discussion was our utilities integrated resource planning, which we call it for some reason, they were in this process of a power supply improvement plan. So our utility, Hawaiian Electric, had put forth a number of plans before the Public Utilities Commission, and they, you know, continued to be rejected as insufficient. So as part of some of the initial planning, Hawaiian Electric had been looking at 100% scenarios, but they, at the time, their modeling was showing that it was more expensive. So there was some modeling and some assurance on their side that, you know, something like this was possible, but that it might cost more money. But we didn't, you know, we really, as our grassroots advocacy approach, we really focused on the vision and getting people excited about, well, this is where we need to go. And you know, so again, to reiterate about what happened post-legislative session, when the utility's final version of that power supply improvement plan that I mentioned actually shows that they think they can get to 100% renewable energy by 2040. And it's actually going to cost, you know, several billions of dollars cheaper than the status quo. So, you know, being forced to adhere to that 100% electricity standard got them to change their tune, but then also, you know, their modeling interestingly followed suit and shows that they think that they can get there by 2040. So I don't, you know, that to me really illustrates the power of that goal and really setting those conversations and those decision makings through that lens, setting them on a different track than they would be if, like, oh, we want to get more renewables. That's a great goal.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. There are other questions? I have a couple other quick ones. What was the RPS before you got to 100%? You said it expired in 2030.
2030, yeah, and it was 70%, but that's a bit misleading because 30% of that was an energy efficiency portfolio standard.
Okay.
It was essentially 40% by 2030, and then it just stopped. So there was nothing beyond that.
Okay. And how much of, you talked about the utilities being in opposition. How strong of an opposition was the utility to this effort? Or were there other parties that were opposing it too?
Yeah, so the first 2 years, the utility was pretty opposed. And then in the third year, they were also opposed, but were a little bit more cautious because at the time, they were going through a merger and acquisition proceeding. So in end of 2014, so into 2015, NextEra had put a petition to acquire Hawaiian Electric Utilities. So that in and of itself opened another whole slew of conversations about, and really put a spotlight on, okay, as a state, what do we want our energy future to look like? So they were a little bit more, still opposed, but a little bit more behind the scenes. But I'll also note, one of the things that we hear a lot, talking to other states is, well, Hawaii is a pretty blue state. So it must be all, sunshine, rainbows, and climate action. But it's not so. Our investor-owned utility has, strong lobbying power, and they are still primarily powered by fossil fuels. So those, the status quo stakeholders still have a very strong hold here and a very strong influence on our, elected officials. So those are still, common challenges that we run up against all the time, and even things that we're, dealing with on other issues at the legislature currently. They still, even if they're not doing big public PR campaigns against a particular effort, they're, in there all the time talking to legislators and working on those relationships to make sure that nothing too dramatic happens to their business model.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Here in Michigan, we're still in this place of magical thinking we just, in December of 2016, we just got the legislature to increase our renewable standard to 2015, which was a big win. But what we're working on, MICAN and a lot of groups here, is trying to get some 100% goals at the city level to show those real life examples, like, look, this is possible, and build momentum for if we hopefully get some more pro clean energy leaders at the state level in the coming year or two, then we can have more traction to follow your inspiring lead.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And yeah, the power of local grown solutions. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do want to highlight, just because we're also pretty proud of it, is just so we, after the RPS law, so that of course just applies to electricity. We're not going to stop there. So the following year, we advocated, beginning in 2016, we're pushing for 100% renewable ground transportation goal. So we had pushed that for 2 years at the state legislature, and it was no dice, but we continued. So then we kind of pivoted and thought, well, why don't we try at the county level? So we had worked with the mayors in the counties, and actually in December of last year, so in December of 2017, all 4 mayors in our state committed to 100% renewable ground transportation by 2045.
Wow.
Yeah, and then also 3 of those counties committed to transitioning their county fleets to 100% renewable by 2035. So we actually have a 100% transportation goal as well in the state, although it's at the county level. And it's not, I mean, it was a proclamation by the mayors, so it wasn't, it's not binding in the way that our RPS law is, but, we're going to hold them to it. So.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
So what's next then?
Oh gosh, so many things. There's, a lot of kind of just housekeeping things with our RPS. So there's a bill right now to actually, the way that our RPS is calculated, it double counts rooftop solar. So it's something that we're trying to fix, and hopefully we can get it fixed this year, just so that it's 100% means 100%. We would also love to see at Blue Planet Foundation to see an RPS for gas. We don't have large-scale natural gas in the state, but there's continuous talks of importing, which would be a huge expense for our state because we need to build all of the infrastructure to get it here, and so that's
for the heating, building heating,
for electricity.
For electricity, okay.
Or we think. So there's been a lot of different proposals, and our current governor is really opposed to importing large-scale importation of LNG. But we have a new there's an election coming up, so we'll see who, we're not sure who the governor will be going forward. So again, going back to the power of leadership, there is a candidate on who's running for governor who's on the board of the gas company. So we have a Hawaii Gas is the entity, and but it's just a DBA for the gas company.
Okay.
So that's a fight that we're gearing up for.
Okay, great.
And so I think helping a lot with the implementation and kind of accelerating that progress.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the goal, and now it's time to figure out how to get there.
So I have a question. So I'm trying to think of what the best way to build public support in a state that is a bit right of center. Michigan's a state that went for Trump, and I think to some extent if we were to do a statewide push for 100%, we would have some pushback. So I guess my question for you is, what are the most significant and compelling things that Hawaii did, and specifically early on in your process, to build public support, and specifically in mind for a state like Michigan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, finding the right messengers that are going to be particularly influential in your states. I think that's a mix. And one of the things that we saw at the workshop with the legislators is that varies quite a bit. And, I think something that California is wrestling with right now. So as an example, we had done some, I think it's important to find those unconventional allies. So we had been working with our IBEW, the Electrical Workers Union, and they emerged as, vocal advocates. So not even, there's scales of advocacy, right? There's, okay, we're not going to publicly oppose this. But then when you can get them to actually, so we got them to, draft an op-ed into our main newspaper. And so trying to take those, okay, I'm not going to oppose it, to becoming vocal champions for something can be really powerful. And then I also think to the work with kids, and it's particularly related to the climate issue, that, all of this is really not about us, and we're all of us are going to be around, but it's really about them, and they get it, and having them, do the talking and less of us talking. So really finding the moments when, advocates take a back seat and let other people carry the message is important. So I think it's, I don't want to opine on who those right messengers are for Michigan, because I'm not in the state, and I don't, have all the connections that you do, but trying to figure out who those unconventional allies are can really make a big difference, because you're showing that this is not, it's not just the usual voices, that it's a broader issue, and that, legislators need to pay attention to this. It's tough though, because, those interests are entrenched. So it's definitely an uphill battle.
Thank you. And I'm also wondering, are there any other states that have as tenacious goals as Hawaii does that you are currently on your radar that you know of that are close to maybe trying to get 100%?
Well, we had been really optimistic about Massachusetts and had been, particularly Marjorie Decker from Massachusetts has really stepped up as a champion. So I would love to see momentum there. I think another place we watch is Colorado and what they're doing. And then also from here, we always watch California. Maybe less for the goal setting and more of the kind of strategic implementation, which is where we're kind of at. Like they have some great policies, particularly around transportation, and just some really great conversations about, what that transition looks like. So we're, looking to them a lot for just things like, on the energy efficiency side and their state level appliance standards and, a lot of things that they've been doing for EV ready buildings. So we look to them for more of kind of those tactical implementation examples.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to take everyone off mute to see if there are any last questions that someone wanted to ask.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Around transportation, the county level transportation and 100% fossil free. What can you tell me a little bit about the details of that? And is it, when you described it, it sounded like it's more than just the county having vehicles that are powered by electricity or renewables, but it sounds like it's the entire county. So can you just give me a little bit more about what that's all about?
Yeah, so just for background, there's 4 counties in the state, so essentially each of the main islands is its own county. So Oahu is the city county of Honolulu. The Big Island is the county of Hawaii. And then we have the county of Kauai and the county of Maui, which is comprised of a number of islands. So each of those mayors proclaimed to get, there was a proclamation ceremony. They want to transition all of the ground transportation in the state to renewable by 2045. That includes private vehicles. And they are vague on what that looks like. The county commitment, of course, they have, control over that transition and are already moving into figuring out what that transition looks like. But the private sector transportation goal is still, they're still figuring out what that means, and then are really kind of relying on advocates and experts to help them get there. So it's a little bit kind of to be determined, but from an advocate standpoint, we're, holding them to that goal and kind of weaving that into the narrative. Say, okay, the counties have committed to this. Here are the things that are going to help them get there, and using that as a platform for advocating for the policies that we think we need to get into place. So it's nice because it's, then we're starting the conversation from, okay, what's going to help us to get to where we need to go, rather than continuing the conversation about where is it that we want to go. So it allows us to really kind of jump in and think about what approaches are best. But I mean, we're still figuring it out, and it isn't a binding target in the way that the 100% RPS is.
And that's really the next step for all of these leaders on the frontier. Once you figure out electricity, the state of Vermont, I know, is doing some work on transportation, and the city of Vancouver. A lot of cities are now looking, and some states are looking at that as well.
Yeah, and how beautiful would it be if that effort was happening simultaneously while we're trying to get to 100% clean energy, so that things could be integrated and coordinated, and there's a lot of value in having those conversations happen at the same time.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. It was really great to be able to hear from you and hear about your work and talk with you. And thanks again for, sorry.
It was my pleasure.
And especially because it was so early in the morning for you.
Kate, I just have one little thing I'd like to send. I'm going to send everybody a link to our new petition. You check your chat there. We have a new petition to ask Traverse City to set a 100% renewable goal. So if everybody on the call could go ahead and sign that petition to kind of get it started, and then we'll announce it to the public. That would be awesome.
That would be. Thanks, Bill. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.